Hey there, folks. This is the Solid Signal podcast for the week of April 26th, 2016. I'm very excited to be here this week because this is going to be a big week at Solid Signal. A lot of stuff that I can't quite tell you yet, but look, all I'm telling you is go to the Solid Signal blog a couple of times in the next week or so. Go to solidsignal.com to look for a whole bunch of new and interesting things that I think that you will enjoy. And that is, in one strange way, the topic of this week's podcast, which is everything new is new again. You know, over the weekend, I spent some time watching Jurassic World, which was, the blockbuster from last summer, and I'd seen it before, but I wanted to see it again. It came on HBO now, and I wanted to see it. And I'm reminded that, there's been a lot of talk lately about how we're kind of recycling a lot of popular culture all of a sudden. And this is nothing new, of course. I happen to be of a generation that they actually referred to as the repeat generation after the 1970s and 1960s, which were really very creative times. The 1980s was a period driven primarily by nostalgia and the desire to recreate things that had previously existed and re-spin them for a new generation. We seem to be there again, and it's my feeling, although I've only lived through this cycle once, that this happens over and over and over again. Every time it happens with new technology, we tend to find that it's a little bit more obvious, because if you think about it, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, it wasn't really clear, wasn't super obvious that things were being remade in the same kind of style that they are now. I mean, you could redo stuff all the time, and there just wasn't, you didn't notice it. I mean, it was a generation ago, and it didn't have wide distribution anymore. But now, old movies and old music are just a click away. And so I think that today's younger people are a lot more cognizant of stuff from 30, 40 years ago that, a couple of generations ago just wouldn't have been possible. I mean, I think that you would have had to be very culturally aware back in the 1960s and 70s to really be so caught up in 20, 30, 40-year-old movies. Growing up, I think there was The Wizard of Oz, and that's one of the only old movies that I really recall seeing, and, maybe Snow White. But today, I think kids are really aware of a lot of older movies that they weren't aware of, back in, quote, the day, unquote. And so we're really aware when something is remade because the old one is right there, and you can look at it, you can listen to it, and whatever, and it doesn't have this same as if it were new kind of effect when you're talking about a remake or a reimagining. But that doesn't necessarily mean that this whole process of redoing things and reimagining them for new generations is a bad thing. Now, let's compare these two movies that I've seen recently. Star Wars The Force Awakens and Jurassic World. Now, I think that Star Wars The Force Awakens is in many ways a better film. I think that it's more empowering toward a lot of different kinds of people, and it's a better story, and I think it's better told and probably better executed. But when it comes to one particular thing, and that's the quality of the remake nature of it, I think Jurassic World actually outshines The Force Awakens when it comes to being a remake. Why? The Force Awakens is, it's a shot-by-shot remake in some spots of the original Star Wars, and it tells a very similar story. But it doesn't necessarily advance that story other than bringing it to new characters, to a new generation. And that's really the whole message that it's got, is that we're kind of rolling this same kind of concept into a new generation. And if you're a new generation of Star Wars fan, you probably appreciate that. On the other hand, I would say Jurassic World has this kind of mean subtext, at least in the first half of the film. The second half devolves into a fairly generic kind of adventure film with really cardboardy characters. But there's a lot of things to say in the first half of the movie about creation and about what you choose to create, whether it's a child or a theme park, and about Hollywood in general, because I think the movie stands as a metaphor for the Hollywood blockbuster system. That people want bigger and bigger blockbusters and more teeth in their blockbusters, and that's not necessarily a good thing because it interferes with sort of the natural flow of storytelling. And I think that's what the director and the writer were trying to say. And so there's a really subtle message there. Anytime you can take a movie and add a message to it in a way that it doesn't detract from its ability to make money, I think that's really quite an accomplishment. Jurassic World does that, and I don't think that Star Wars The Force Awakens does. In fact, once you take the economics out of it, because I think economics is certainly a motivational thing. I mean, movie studios want to continue to make money and people want to continue going to the movies, so it's a win-win there. But once you take the movie money-making aspect out of it, the only other reason to remake a film or a song or a poem or a book or any other kind of creative work is to add something to it, to add a layer that makes it relevant to a new generation and to the moment that we live in. To take something very, very old like Romeo and Juliet and remake it as West Side Story, remake it again in the 90s as a United States, America, gangland kind of film. This adds to the tapestry of the work. This takes the basic story and interprets it in a new way that makes it not only accessible, but more important than the previous. To simply take a movie and remake it because we're going to want to make some more money down the road, and I think that, all apologies, Disney is doing this an awful lot lately with The Jungle Book and the Cinderella and the Maleficent and the whatever. To do that just as a straight money grab may be great for the corporation, and the kids probably don't care because they're maybe not as familiar with the source material. But it doesn't add anything to our culture, it doesn't add anything to the artistry, and therefore it really doesn't give you any reason to do it. And certainly, as somebody who has watched thousands and thousands of films, it doesn't give me any reason to go and plunk down my money to see it. That's it for this supersized edition of the Solid Signal podcast. Have a great one, and I'll see you next week.